Welcome to our magical sleep journey. The black screen will help to get rid of unnecessary light so you can sleep better. If you have any suggestions for improvement, please write them in the comments. Try to listen as carefully as you can because there can be hidden secrets in this story. And now relax, close your eyes, and listen to this magical story from another dimension. In the city of Kronos, where the streets were paved with clockwork and the air hummed with the sound of 1,000 ticking gears, time was not just a measurement, it was currency, it was law, and for some, it was a prison. The rich hoarded it in gleaming hourglass towers, the poor bartered seconds for scraps of bread, and in the shadow of the great Chronometria Cathedral, a boy named Elias sold his own memories to survive. He didn't mean to steal the pocket watch. It was a reflex. The glint of gold in the clockmaker's coat, the careless way he leaned over the railing of the timekeeper's bridge to toss stale crumbs to the mechanical fish in the river below. The moment Elias's fingers closed around the timepiece, he knew it was no ordinary trinket. For one thing, it was warm. For another, it was ticking backward. Then the screaming started. Across the city, clocks shattered in their cases. Gears rained from the towers like metallic hail. The great central clock of Chronometria let out a groan that shook the foundations of the city, and for the first time in recorded history, time stopped. That's when the clockmaker's daughter found him. Her name was Lyra, and she wore grief like a second skin. Her left arm was a masterpiece of whirring gears and polished brass, her right eye a lens that could see the frayed edges of stolen moments. She didn't ask for the watch back. She didn't need to. Elias could see the truth in the way her mechanical fingers trembled. This wasn't just a timepiece. It was her father's heart, literally and figuratively. And without it, the city was unraveling. Together, they plunged into the underbelly of Kronos, where rogue seconds pooled in alleyways like stagnant water, and the forgotten minutes of the city's past lurked in the corners like hungry things. They bargained with the Sandman, who dealt not in sleep, but in erased histories, outwitted the guild of minute thieves, who could pick the locks of your memories as easily as a pocket, and faced the terrifying truth. The watch wasn't just broken. It had been infected. Something was living inside it. A creature of forgotten deadlines and missed opportunities, of just one more minutes, and I'll do it tomorrow's. It fed on procrastination, grew fat on wasted potential, and now it was gnawing its way through the very fabric of Kronos. To fix time, Elias would have to face the moments he'd spent a lifetime running from. Lyra would have to decide whether to save the city or resurrect the father who'd built his empire on stolen seconds. And both would learn that some clocks don't just measure time, they mourn it. The creature in the watch had a name, though no one had spoken it in centuries crashed, the devourer of intentions. It pulsed within the timepiece like a second heartbeat, its form shifting between smoke and serrated clockwork. Lyra's brass fingers trembled as she held the watch aloft, her lens eye focusing on the cracks where dark liquid, thicker than oil, seeped out. "It's not just eating time," she whispered. "It's eating the idea of time. The what-ifs. The almosts." Elias understood then why the streets of Kronos had gone so quiet. People weren't just frozen, they were unmade. Their choices dissolved mid-breath, their stories unwritten before they could be lived. The baker who'd almost confessed his love to the florist? Gone. The inventor on the verge of a revelation? Erased. The city wasn't paused, it was being unstitched. Their only lead was the Sandman's ledger, a tome bound in eyelid leather, its pages filled with the ink of last breaths. It revealed the truth. Lyra's father hadn't just built the clocks. He'd bargained with Krast, trading the city's procrastinated moments for his own immortality. But the creature had grown hungry, and now it wanted the feast of 1,000 abandoned dreams. To reach Krast's lair, they had to cross the Bridge of Almosts, a span of glass-thin seconds hovering over an abyss where lost opportunities pooled like tar. Every step echoed with whispers. I should have left sooner. I almost said yes. What if I'd tried? The bridge tested them. Lyra's mechanical arm rusted at the joints as she relived the moment she'd hesitated to pull her father from his malfunctioning clockwork forge. Elias's lungs burned with the memory of the orphanage roof, where he'd once balanced on the edge, wondering if the fall would hurt less than the loneliness. Krast awaited them in the cathedral's heart, where the great clock's pendulum swung over a void. It had taken the clockmaker's form, a hollow mimicry of Lyra's father, its voice the sound of winding gears grinding to a halt. You can't kill me, it crooned. I am the space between thought and action, the sigh before the effort. I am every later ever spoken. But Elias had spent his life surviving on stolen time. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the one thing he'd never bartered, a single crumpled minute. The last memory of his mother's voice singing. He threw it into the void. Krast screamed. The creature convulsed, its form unraveling as the melody, a lullaby about stars and second chances, infected its core. For the first time, it wasn't fed by hesitation. It was poisoned by love, by a moment cherished instead of wasted. With Krast weakened, Lyra faced the watch. She could restart time, but at a cost. Her father's stolen years would vanish. The clocks would tick true. And Elias? He'd forget her. The rules of Chronos were clear. Repaired time left no room for paradoxes. She hesitated. Then she wound the watch backward. Elias woke on the timekeeper's bridge, the pocket watch gone from his hand. The city buzzed around him, alive with motion and sound. The clockmaker's forge stood intact, though the man himself was now just a kind-faced stranger, mortal and forgetful. And Lyra? She stood at the bridge's edge, her arms flesh and blood, her eye no longer a lens. When she smiled at him, it was with the quiet joy of someone who'd chosen the present over the past. Do I know you? Elias asked, though his chest ached with the ghost of an answer. Lyra tossed a crumb to the mechanical fish below. Not yet, she said, but you will. And as the great clock of chronometria struck the hour, its chime carried a new sound, the echo of a story that had almost been lost, but wasn't. The ticking of the great clock settled into a new rhythm as Elias walked the streets of a Chronos he no longer quite recognized. The air smelled different now, less like oil and desperation, more like rain on warm cobblestones. He kept finding himself standing outside the clockmaker's shop, watching through the window as the man, ordinary now, just a craftsman with ink-stained fingers, repaired a simple mantel clock. There was something about the way he tilted his head when concentrating that made Elias's chest tighten with unplaceable nostalgia. Lyra found him there every time. She never explained how she knew where to look. She'd simply appear beside him, her shadow falling across his in a way that felt strangely familiar, like a dream upon waking. You keep coming back here, she observed one evening as the gas lamps flickered to life. Not an accusation, just a fact laid bare between them like one of the clockmaker's disassembled timepieces. Elias rubbed at the hollow place beneath his ribs. I think I lost something important. The words tasted metallic on his tongue, like the memory of a wound. Lyra's fingers brushed against his wrist, her touch sending a peculiar vibration through him, as if his very bones were tuning forks resonating to some hidden frequency. "Maybe you didn't lose it," she said softly. "Maybe you gave it away." The shop bell jingled as the clockmaker emerged, wiping his hands on a rag. He squinted at them with no recognition, but offered a hesitant smile anyway. "Evening, young folks. You hear about the apprentice position." Elias felt the world tilt slightly. Somewhere beneath his skin, gears he didn't know he had began to turn. Lyra's hand found his, their fingers interlacing like perfectly meshed cogs. "Yes," they answered together, their voices blending in a harmony that made the clockmaker's eyebrows rise. And as they stepped over the threshold together, the great clock above the city chimed, not marking an ending, but a beginning that had always been waiting to unfold. The apprenticeship began with the quiet hum of gears finding their proper alignment. Elias discovered his hands knew things his mind had forgotten, the precise tension needed for a mainspring, the way to polish brass until it sang under fingertips. Lyra would watch him sometimes, her dark eyes reflecting the lamplight as he worked, her lips curving when he muttered to the tiny components as if they could hear him. The shop became a living thing around them. Clocks Elias didn't remember repairing would chime at odd hours, playing fragments of melodies that made his pulse stutter. Lyra would pause then, her hands stilling over her workbench, as if waiting for him to recognize something. But the memory always slipped away like oil through gears, leaving only a dull ache behind. Then came the day the broken music box arrived. It was older than the city, maybe, its rosewood casing carved with spirals that seemed to move when stared at too long. The woman who brought it and clutched it like something precious and dangerous. "It won't play," she said. "Not properly. It gets stuck on the same note over and over." Elias lifted the lid. The mechanism inside was unlike anything he'd seen, not gears, but tiny silver wheels orbiting each other in slow, celestial patterns. When he touched the mainspring, the box shuddered and let out a single, fractured note. And suddenly, he wasn't in the shop anymore. He was standing in a room made of golden light, where the walls pulsed like a heartbeat. Before him stretched an endless corridor of doors, each one slightly ajar, each one whispering. Behind one, a child's laughter. Behind another, the smell of burning metal. Behind the third, the crushing weight of deep water. And then there was the door. The one that wasn't wood or metal, but something alive, its surface breathing, its handle shaped like a keyhole that mirrored the hollow in his chest. From beyond it came a sound that made his bones vibrate, a great, shuddering tick-tock that wasn't a clock at all, but something far older. "You're not supposed to be here." Lyra stood beside him, but not the Lyra of the shop. This Lyra had stars in her hair and a shadow that stretched in all directions at once. Her fingers, when they closed around his wrist, left behind glowing fingerprints. "This is the clockwork sanctum," she said, "where time goes to be mended. Or unmade." Elias looked down at his hands. They were flickering, solid one moment, translucent the next. "What's happening to me?" Lyra's expression fractured. "You're remembering." The door groaned open. Beyond it waited not a room, but a moment, the moment he'd first held the pocket watch. The moment time had stopped. The moment he'd chosen to forget. Because the truth was, shall I reveal it? Elias had never just found the watch. He'd been the watch. A fragment of the original chronometria, a living piece of the first clock ever built. The clockmaker hadn't just bargained with Krast, he'd created Elias from the stolen seconds, a child-shaped vessel to hold the city's lost time. And Lyra? She'd always known. She'd been the balance, the daughter who loved her father but loved the truth more. The one who'd wound the watch backward not just to save Kronos, but to give Elias the one thing he'd never had, a chance to be human. The music box's note faded. Elias gasped back into himself, collapsing against the workbench. The shop was silent except for the quiet, insistent ticking of 100 clocks. Lyra knelt beside him, her real, human hands warm against his face. You felt it, didn't you? Elias stared at her, at the shop, at the ordinary world that had never been ordinary at all. Somewhere beneath his ribs, something was winding tight. Not a clock this time. Not a countdown. A heartbeat. He reached for her. And the clocks all struck the hour at once. The sound of 100 clocks striking at once should have shattered the windows, should have split the sky. But instead, the world bent. The shop's walls rippled like disturbed water. The workbench dissolved into golden dust. Even the air itself seemed to crystallize, each suspended particle catching the light like a tiny, frozen firework. Lyra's hands were still pressed to Elias's face, but her fingers had gone translucent. Through them, he could see the impossible layers of reality peeling back like the pages of a book. The shop was still there, but beneath it, or inside it, or between it, stretched the clockwork sanctum, its infinite doors swinging open one by one. And behind every door, himself. 1,000 Elias variants living 1,000 different lives. In one, he wore a clockmaker's apron, his hair streaked with silver. In another, he was made entirely of gears, his eyes twin pendulums swinging in perfect time. In still another, he was nothing but a shadow stretching across the face of a broken moon. The most terrible door showed only an empty room where dust motes danced in slanting light. A room that smelled of abandonment. This is what happens when a clock forgets it's a clock, Lyra whispered. Her voice came from everywhere at once, from the walls, from the trembling air, from inside Elias's own skull. It starts believing it's human. Elias wanted to scream, wanted to laugh, wanted to shatter into a million pieces. Instead, he reached into his own chest, not metaphorically, literally, and wrapped his fingers around the mainspring of his heart. It was warm. It was alive. And it was his. With a single, shuddering breath, he pulled. The world exploded into motion. The shop reassembled itself molecule by molecule. The clocks, mid-chime, swallowed their own sounds. Lyra gasped as her body solidified, her fingers digging into his shoulders. And Elias. Elias remembered. Not just the watch. Not just the chronometria. But the before. The moment the first clock had been wound. The moment time had been given shape. The moment a lonely god had whispered, "Let there be ticks, and let there be talks," and then, in a fit of inexplicable generosity, let there be someone to hear them. He had always been more than a vessel, more than a mechanism. He was the listener, the one who made time mean something. Lyra was staring at him, her eyes wide. "Elias, your hands." He looked down. His fingers were glowing, not with golden light, but with something far stranger. A radiance that had no name in any human tongue. A color that existed only in the space between seconds. The broken music box lay between them, its gears finally still. Elias touched it, and the universe inhaled. The music box sprang to life beneath Elias's fingertips, its celestial gears spinning faster and faster until they blurred into a single, shimmering disk of silver light. A melody poured forth, one that didn't just enter the ears, but vibrated directly into the bones, a song older than time itself. The shop's walls dissolved like sugar in water, revealing the infinite clockwork cosmos beyond. Lyra's breath caught as she saw it, the true nature of existence laid bare. Galaxies turned like precision gears in some unimaginable mechanism. Nebulas pulsed like the glow of a watchmaker's lamp. And at the center of it all, where the pendulum of reality swung with metronomic perfection, stood the first ticker, not a god, but something far more terrifying in its loneliness. You see now, the first ticker said without moving its mouth, for it had none, its voice the sound of 1,000,000 synchronized clocks. I built this universe to be perfect. Measured. Predictable. But perfection is empty. Elias felt the truth resonate through his glowing hands. The first ticker had created him not as an accident, but as an experiment. Could time learn to feel? Could gears dream? Could a clock become something more than the sum of its parts? Lyra stepped forward, her ordinary human form suddenly blazing with reflected light. You wanted him to break the rules, she realized. You needed someone who could hear the music behind the ticking. The cosmic clockwork shuddered. A gear the size of a continent slipped out of alignment. The first ticker's form flickered between a featureless humanoid and something vast and incomprehensible. I have wound this universe 7,422,000 times, it said, each word making stars tremble. Each cycle identical to the last. Until now. Elias looked at his hands, no longer just hands, but conduits for something primordial. He understood with sudden, terrifying clarity that he wasn't just the listener. He was the improvisation, the syncopated rhythm in the grand mechanical symphony, the flaw that made perfection interesting. The music box's song reached its crescendo. Lyra reached for him. The first ticker watched with the hungry attention of a creator seeing its creation become something new. And Elias, no longer just a boy, not quite a god, made his choice. He took Lyra's hand, and together they began to dance, not to the metronome's rigid beat, but to the wild, unpredictable rhythm of a heart that had learned to keep its own time. The dance began slowly at first, a tentative step, a swaying hesitation as Elias and Lyra moved between the whirring celestial gears. But with each turn, their movements grew bolder. Elias's glowing hands left trails of that impossible color in their wake, splashing across the cosmic clockwork like paint across a canvas. Where the light touched, the rigid mechanisms began to change. Gears sprouted delicate filigree. Pendulums curved into elegant, unpredictable arcs. The stars themselves pulsed in time to the music box's song, no longer bound to their perfect, measured orbits. The first ticker watched, its form flickering wildly between shapes, sometimes a man in a watchmaker's apron, sometimes a vast, faceless entity of interlocking wheels. It did not stop them. It did not intervene. But Elias could feel its attention like a weight against his skin, heavy with something he'd never expected to detect in the creator of all things. Longing. Lyra spun under his arm, her laughter ringing out like the chime of a bell never meant to keep time. Her shadow stretched long and wild across the face of a slowing moon, and where it touched, tiny flowers bloomed in the void. Flowers made of stardust and forgotten lullabies. You're changing it, she breathed as Elias pulled her close. He looked down at their intertwined fingers, at the way his light curled around her wrist like a living thing. No, he realized. We're the change. For the first time since the universe had been wound, the great cosmic clock stuttered. A single, glorious second stretched into infinity. And in that endless moment, something extraordinary happened. The first ticker smiled. It was not a human expression. There were too many teeth, too many shifting planes to its face. But the emotion behind it was unmistakable. Then, tick, the universe exhaled. Elias and Lyra stood once more in the clockmaker's shop, the music box silent between them. The air smelled of oil and peppermint and something indefinable, something new. Outside, the city of Kronos carried on unaware that reality had just rewritten itself at its very foundations. Lyra's fingers tightened around his. "Do you think it'll last?" she asked quietly. Elias listened. Somewhere deep beneath his ribs, his heart kept time, not to the measured beat of the cosmic clock, but to its own wild rhythm. He smiled. "Let's find out." And somewhere beyond time, beyond space, in the quiet dark where all stories begin, a single gear turned, just slightly out of sync. The silence after the last chime stretched like taffy, golden and thick with possibility. Lyra's thumb traced absent circles on Elias's wrist where their hands remained joined, her touch sending tiny vibrations through the delicate lattice of his newly rewritten bones. Outside the shop window, the ordinary miracles of an unordinary world unfolded. A street vendor's hot chocolate cooled exactly 3 seconds slower than physics should allow. A child's skipped heartbeat stuttered back into rhythm with unusual enthusiasm. And in the alley behind the bakery, 2 stray cats paused mid-fight to watch a snowflake hover motionless for 7 perfect seconds before continuing its descent. The music box between them gave a soft, contented sigh, an exhale no mechanical object should possess, and collapsed gently into a pile of rosewood dust and stardust. From its remains rose a single silver key, its teeth shaped like the spaces between constellations. Lyra reached for it instinctively, then froze when her shadow moved half a second after she did. "Oh," she breathed, watching the delayed silhouette with widening eyes. "It's not just the universe that's changed. We're different now, too." Elias flexed his fingers, watching the strange new light beneath his skin pulse in time with the now visible auroras shimmering above Kronos, auroras that had never existed before tonight. The city's famous clock towers were chiming in rounds now, their usually rigid synchronization delightfully unraveled into a complex canon of overlapping ticks and talks. Somewhere in the harbor, the mechanical fish leapt in arcs that defied both gravity and geometry, their brass scales flashing messages in a code only the moonlight could read. The shop door creaked open without a customer to open it. The air smelled suddenly of lightning and lemon cake. A pocket watch on the repair bench began singing a lullaby in the clockmaker's voice, though the words were in a language that didn't exist yesterday. Lyra pressed her forehead to Elias's shoulder, her laughter vibrating through him like a well-struck tuning fork. "What have we done?" Elias turned his face into her hair, which now contained a single streak of that impossible color, the hue that existed only in the space between their shared breaths. "Something interesting," he murmured. And in the cathedral tower high above the city, the great clock's pendulum, for the first time in eternity, swung sideways. The sideways swing of the great pendulum sent ripples through the fabric of time itself. In the clockmaker's shop, Elias and Lyra watched as the dust motes hung suspended in a beam of sunlight that shouldn't have existed at this hour, each particle glowing with its own tiny inner light. Lyra's fingers tightened around the constellation key as she felt the universe hold its breath around them. The clocks throughout the shop began chiming in reverse, their melodies weaving together into a song that sounded like memory and possibility intertwined. Elias reached out, his luminous hand hovering just above the pile of stardust that had been the music box. "It's not broken," he realized softly. "It's become something new." just like us. Outside, the people of Kronos paused in their daily routines, though none could say why. A baker forgot to count his change. A scholar left her calculations unfinished. A child stopped mid-sentence, distracted by the way the sunlight made the cobblestones shimmer like the scales of those impossible mechanical fish in the harbor. In that suspended moment, Lyra turned the key in the air before them. It fit perfectly into a lock no one could see, but both could feel. With a soft click that echoed backward through time and forward into futures yet unimagined, the universe exhaled. The shop door swung open to reveal not the street outside, but a path of moonlight on water stretching toward a horizon that glowed with the warm, golden light of 1,000 untold stories waiting to begin. "Shall we?" Lyra asked, her eyes reflecting entire galaxies that hadn't existed yesterday. Elias smiled, and the last rigid gear of the old universe finally, joyfully slipped out of alignment. Together, they stepped forward, not into the future, but into the endless, beautiful now. And somewhere beyond time, the first ticker wound its watch one final time, and let it run down, smiling as the hands began moving of their own accord at last.